Fantasy AI. All right, welcome back to the computer room. Today we're going to look at sophomore slumps. Did your second year meet or exceed the previous first year? We're going to look at wide receivers. Is the sophomore slump a real thing? Well, I can quantify it for you. So let's look at here. Here's the first 2020 sophomores. I've got it here for the data for. You can see here that the 2019 fantasy points are listed here in the first column and how many they scored the next year. Well, you can see that Jerry Jeudy underperformed, and we're going to mark them in red. And if you meet or exceed, you get green, and if you're a little bit below, I put you in yellow. So there's how we calculate the sophomore slump. And here we can see the first slide. We had CeeDee Lamb meet and Justin Jefferson exceeded, and it kind of a mixed result. Now, Henry Ruggs, he maintained his badness for 2 years. So, I mean, he's green, but that's just how we have to calculate this. So, moving on to 2021, you can see that Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith did good. They did, but Jamar Chase had that down year. He would have been the sophomore slump one that he really nailed you. You had him that year. Tony, he hasn't really been ever panned out. And Bateman, he didn't either. But it isn't really, it's if they met or went ahead in their next year. So they can be consistently bad and still be green. Here was last year. So here you get a good look at last year's sophomores. Now they were sophomores in 2022, but this is how they did in 2023. So you can see the only one of the sophomores last year was Olave that met or exceeded his rookie year. The rest of them were all down. You can see there's Garrett Wilson down. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers. Watson from Packers, injury plagued. Drake London didn't even match his first year, rookie year. Dotson, disappointment. Burks, constant disappointment. So you can see how we're kind of calculating these. So here's how it works out. You can see that in their sophomore years, if you add them all up and average it out, there's an 11% regression. I don't know if defensive figures them out. I don't know if it's just bad luck or how it is, but it's consistent. There's a sophomore slump, especially at receiver. So let's see who's capable of getting one of these next year. Who's could have a sophomore slump. So we're going through last year's rookies. And first up, well, it's very hard for Jalen Hyatt to slump with 373 yards receiving. He did have a rookie of the week. He had 100 yards receiving that week. I think it was against New England. But the last 5 games, you can see he had 12 targets. Just a disappointment. Came in 102nd at wide receiver. The good part was no one was expecting much, so it wasn't really. And it's hard for him to slump from a bad season, but you got to have 10 on the list, so let's move on. Next up on the list is Jonathan Mingo from Carolina. You can see he had 418 yards. It says here he was the second on team with routes. He had 539, so he was in the game a lot, but he just didn't do much with it. You can see he came in here the ranked 93rd receiver. Played a lot, good experience. He was the 5th receiver drafted in that class. So I think he was in the second round. But moving on, let's see who's up next. This is number 8 was Quentin Johnston. He finished 79th. He was the 2nd receiver taken in the 23 draft. Now Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are gone, and he's got a big frame. You can see that he had 430 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, came in 79th. Disappointment. Not a lot was expected out of him, and he didn't perform a lot. So it's hard. I mean, these first few are going to be hard to. You're not going to be that confident on them that you're going to say, "Oh boy, he slumped." But moving on, maybe these next ones. Marvin Mims. Do you know he was a Pro Bowler? Not at receiver, but as a return specialist. He finished 75th as the receiver. And he was preseason ranked 57th, so, I mean, not much of a disappointment there. 377 yards receiving, 8th was the 8th receiver taken in his draft class. So moving on down the road, we'll see who's up next. JSN came in next. He was the 51st ranked receiver. Of course, Megatron and Tyler Lockett sucking up targets doesn't help him much. But you can see that he had 628 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was in the game. Has a new offensive coordinator, and I think they like to air it out a little bit, possibly. So we'll see what happens there. But he was the top receiver drafted last year. Finished 51st. So yet again, I mean, I don't know many people are going to be very high on him this year. But you got to remember the sophomore slump and see how it affects these guys. That's what we're looking at here. Tank Dell. Now, he would have been higher on the list if he'd played more than 11 games. Look at that. He was averaging 100 yards and a touchdown almost. 700 yards, 7 touchdowns in 11 games. He was on fire when he got hurt. Finished 38th. Only played in 11 games. Now, he's got some new competition with Diggs. But we'll see how he bounces back. Now, if they're going to be too high on him, his sophomore slump excuse would be Diggs coming in and crowding the field there a little bit. Moving on, let's see who comes in next at number 4. Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers finished 30th. Was the go-to wide receiver down the stretch there. He's cleared his police troubles. He had 850 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he's going to be the number 1 ranked receiver out of Baltimore next year. And they'll be talking him up a little bit. But you know what? When you see this, you saw that 11% discount or penalty for being a sophomore, you might want to pass on these sophomores. I mean, they're going to be excited, the top ones here. But, well, Rashid Rice, it looks like he's caused his own sophomore slump. Multi-game suspensions on tap. 119-mile-an-hour car crash. So he had 938 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was set up good, probably. Finished 28th. If he wouldn't have had this problem, he might have had a good year, but the sophomore slump was self-induced. Moving on, let's see who's coming in. The second receiver. Jordan Addison, 19th receiver overall as a rookie. He was the 4th receiver taken in that draft class. He came in only ranked 34th, but hey, you got a bargain if you took him. Stretched out. Look at that, 10 touchdowns. A lot of this was when Jefferson was out. 900 yards receiving. Sam Darnold's their quarterback right now, but that might change in the draft. Even not. Sam Darnold's going to have a lot of weapons there in Minnesota. Justin Jefferson is going to keep a lid on Addison, you'd think, as long as he stays healthy. Justin Jefferson's the number 1 target in town. So let's try to look at number 1 here. Who was the top receiver as a sophomore or as a rookie last year? Jaden Reed. Finished 18th. He had 793 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns, multi-purpose. You see here almost 120 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. That gave him the edge on Addison just a little bit and edged him out as the top rookie fantasy scorer last year. Now, before you get too high on Reed and Addison and those, remember, we're worried about the sophomore slump, right? We see that, hey, going back, they have an 11%. This is back over 3 years, and it goes back longer because we all know it. We wouldn't be a term sophomore slump if it didn't happen. So be wary of those rookies or the sophomores next year. So moving on. Hey, if you're liking what you're seeing, please hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button, would you please? All right, then I'm going to fill my shorts. This is where I like to fill my shorts. So this is a rapid repeat. Got the sophomore slump calculated at minus 11%. Here's the rookies who from last year. Hyatt was the 10th rookie last year. Up next was Jonathan Mingo. He was the 9th receiver rookie last year. Up next was Quentin Johnson. Not much to slump for these guys. He's 79th receiver last year. Marvin Mims was a Pro Bowler, though, as a return specialist. Up next is the 6th receiver was JSN, was the first drafted receiver from the class last year. Moving on, Tank Dell had a good season going. For the 11 games, 709 yards, Was on fire till he got hurt. Zay Flowers was the go-to receiver at Baltimore at the end. Finished 30th. Look out for that sophomore slump, though. Rashid Rice creates his own sophomore slump with a multi-game suspension on tap. Up next was Jordan Addison. Jefferson's back, probably going to create his sophomore slump. And the top receiver rookie last year, Jaden Reed. Look out for that sophomore slump.